Hello, it's Dr. Henderson again, and now for the third literary period, realism. Its historical, cultural, and literary characteristics. Don't need that. Realism was mainly a reaction against the aesthetics and ideals of Romanticism, just as Romanticism was a reaction against the Enlightenment. And realism roughly surfaced as a consistent literary movement in the mid-19th century, 1840s through 1860s, and then continued through the late 20th century and very early in the late 19th century, and the very early 20th century. The characteristics of realism: there was a focus on fidelity to actuality in its representation in literature. In other words, trying to be as realistically representational as possible, to make it as close to the real thing in life, in person as possible, which is called verisimilitude. Focuses on the immediate, the here and now, the specific action, the detailed descriptions, almost on the microscopic level, moment by moment. It resists sentimentality. It's very earthy and gritty in that way. And it follows what is called the mimetic theory of art, which says that art should have an immediate correspondence between the subject and its representation, again, to have as much verisimilitude as possible, as close to the real thing, to real life as possible. There is deeply penetrating psychological characterization. You tend to be all up in the characters' heads. And the prose is clear and direct, far less, whimsical or flighty or ornamental than what is typically associated with Romanticism. Very blunt. And it resists symmetry in plot, and, well, why is that? Because the rules of plot only happen in fiction. And, of course, realism is a form of fiction, but it's a fiction that tries not to be fiction. Again, to be as realistic as possible. And real life tends to not follow the plot elements of introduction, complication, crisis, climax, and resolution and conclusion. No, life doesn't follow those rules, and therefore realism tries to not follow those rules either. The subject matter centers around the central real issues of life. In their things that you tend to look over, things that you take for granted, or things that are ugly, that nobody likes to talk about. In summation, it is brutally honest. Okay, and now for some realism literature.